Chester, welcome in, my guy. I'm digging the shirt. I'm gonna need to know where you got that because it's awesome.
Thank you.
But I don't have your intro next to me, and I know you've got a really prolific journey to tell us about. So why don't you tell us a little about who you are, who you're working with, and a little bit about your crazy lean journey and how you got into this world.
Sure. First things first, this shirt is from Chubby's. I don't know if they still make it, but it's my Friday shirt. Today is my Friday. I took a couple days off before Memorial Day weekend. Yeah, so Chester Matkey, currently an industrial engineer for Cruise. We're a company up in primarily the Bay Area, but we have a couple other satellite cities, and we're doing autonomous vehicles. So we have some cars out on the road that you can hail like a taxi, but there's nobody in the front seat. So my job in particular is to try to help us scale, do more with less, make sure all of our processes are efficient, repeatable, with as little variability as possible. But before this, I was consulting for a little bit by myself. Turns out I didn't really like living out of a suitcase 24/7. So that's why I started looking for not being my own boss again. But before that, when I met Eric, I was working down in Santa Maria for, 8 or 9 years after Cal Poly, for a company that went through a couple different names. Its last name was Safran Aerospace. And we built first class, business class airplane seats out there. And so there I went from manufacturing engineer to the continuous improvement lean team, jumped into project management for a bit, was asked to come back to manage the industrial engineering team. But throughout all those iterations, it was still always trying to keep an eye on, how do we spread continuous improvement practices, being one of the mentors for our belt program, and trying to just apply Lean Six Sigma not only with ourselves, but going out, seeing all the great other companies that Eric was able to bring together, benchmark off of them, and just help each other improve.
Awesome. Love that. And I would be remiss if I didn't, but Matt Weber told me every time that I talk to you, he wants me to say what's up, and then he misses working with you every day. So
it's a two-way street. If you see him, tell him I say hi as well.
I see him almost daily, and I hate it every time. No, I'm just joking. He's good people. So Chester, self-driving cars. This is something you have piqued my interest. I'm going to go off script. Sorry, Professor Olsen, you're not here, so I can do what I want. So self-driving cars, how did you go from aerospace to consulting to self-driving cars? Like I imagine that's not, did you just hop on Indeed and saw a help wanted sign? How'd you get there?
Yeah, so the hop off of aerospace was not my own choice per se. As you guys can all imagine, aerospace took a beating at the beginning of COVID. And so at some point, they eventually announced like, hey guys, turns out our factory drew the short straw. And so it was a pretty rough patch, right? Of like over 6-8 months. We were just downsizing our factory until me and a couple of others, we were like the ones to chain the doors. We were, the very last people there. I was fortunate enough where they asked like, hey, do you want to stay with the company or take severance? I asked where would staying with the company put me in? And they said like the Panhandle of Texas. I'd been to that factory. It's like an hour and a half from Dallas, which was the closest big city. And I said, no, I'm good. I'll take my severance. So with that, I went on a road trip to find myself in my quarter life crisis. Went around the country, converted my CRV into a solo camper, was on the road for maybe about 4 months. And the whole trip made me realize like, no, I'm pretty much a California boy. I'm going to go back to where I'm from. I'm originally from Sacramento, wanted to be a bit closer to my parents. So that's why I started looking for jobs in the Bay Area. And that at that point, it was very much like a cold calling on Indeed, on LinkedIn, on, every job hunt kind of place. And like I tell my little sister, don't be discouraged if you get a whole bunch of no's. Like this is going to sound a little braggadocio, right? But I think that I had a pretty good resume, had a lot of great experience. And even then I went through, I think 80 interviews. And from 80 interviews, I got 4 offers. So stick with it. Wait till you don't take the first offer. Wait till you find the one you want. Make sure that you're a good fit for the company just as much as the company's a good fit for you.
Awesome. So tell me, Jester, so I toured the Zodiac, I think it was Zodiac when I toured it years ago. So going from kind of aerospace and lean, tell me how and then you did a little self-discovery and now you're kind of back into self-driving, not a traditional lean implementation. How's your view changed if you were to reflect back at your time at Safran and kind of assembly line manufacturing to where you are now, including the time where you weren't doing it and you were just kind of in your self-discovery quarter life crisis phase? How has your thoughts about that evolved?
Sure. Yeah. So while I was consulting, the businesses I was consulting for, it was still a pretty clear-cut manufacturing environment like Safran. So whether it was, a 30-person mom and pop shop or another kind of multinational conglomerate, it still by and large felt the same. It was very much the same work. Trying to set up leader standard work, trying to line balance, figuring out how many people you need in each workstation, things like that. At some point on the road trip, I was like, it was fun, but I felt like I was losing, like my brain was rotting. It was just too much candy. And I was like, I need to get back to work. I need to use my brain and do something. At Cruise, it's been very interesting. So on one hand, our primary stakeholder is GM, which is, again, like this, giant company, very traditional manufacturing lines. But we're very removed from them. So they supply the hardware to our specifications, but we pretty much do our own thing. And it's been interesting in a company in kind of the tech startup world, just how different like the pace of everything is, the assumptions you have. And so I remember at Safran or Zodiac, I used to complain quite a bit to my dad and just being like, man, it takes 7 approvals. I have to walk this up like 4 levels of the chain of command to release this document or get this thing put out on the shop floor. And at Cruise, it's the opposite, right? It's like, yeah, do it, go for it, be out there, try whatever you want. And so I would say, in anything, there's like a sweet spot, some level of balance is needed. Having no guardrails or, no standard processes, it can be a little chaotic at times. So I think really that's what our team is intended to do, is to start making everything that the people are doing, transform it from tribal knowledge, make it more standardized, repeatable, reducing the variability. Like we were looking at some of our operators who service the vehicles every day, and it can vary from, a new person who doesn't know the job well, being able to prepare 2 vehicles in their shift to, a vet who's got it down, being able to prepare 20, 25 vehicles. So, having this gap where like 8 hours from one person to another person is a difference of 10x is, like, oh man, we need to take that guy's best practices and make sure everybody's doing it the same way.
Awesome. I love that. So I'm going to get a little existential with you. Is that cool? Can we get a little weird?
Sure. Yeah, I was a philosophy minor.
All right. Oh, wow. Even better. So I want to, when you get into this lean world and we tend to geek out on it, and there's lots of cool things, but what do you find, beyond the tools and beyond the it's challenging and engaging, what do you find so personally gratifying about, this concept of continuous improvement and how it can be additive to not just the company's bottom line, but to people's, life?
Great question. I think the thing I like most about my job is that I feel like I'm people who are in lean or continuous improvement in a company are often referred to as like internal consultants. And in a lot of respects, I'd agree with that, right? We're sent on to the hot projects. We're asked to give input as objectively as possible on how to balance the needs of multiple groups. But I feel like when you're part of a team inside a company, you're able to look at it from the point of view of how can I help you, right? My job is just helping other people and trying to make them better, be able to do more with less, answer their problems, right? Go connect the dots that they're unable to see in their day to day, as opposed to what I've seen sometimes with external consultants. And again, right, like this is coming from somebody who was an external consultant, where it can be used as a cost cutting measure. So I think like the dark side of lean is, you know, if we're able to do this job in half the time, then we're going to fire half the people. But in my experience, it's never played out that way. It's been, we're able to do this job in half the time. So now we can free you up to spend the other half of your time to improve other things even more. And as long as you have that kind of guiding light, I think it's very, very satisfying. You know, I think there'd be widespread revolt on my team if we knew that what we were doing was going to lead to our coworkers on the front lines, you know, having to lead the company.
So tell me about a project that you did that you found to be personally gratifying, like maybe not your most successful, or I saved $1 bajillion or whatever, but like the thing that you, when you think of the one that gives you just kind of that dewy-eyed, warm and fuzzy, and you think about it, because, and why was that project so meaningful?
Across my whole career, or specifically at Cruise?
Across your whole career. I want the whole book, my guy.
Yeah, okay. Maybe one of the ones that I think kind of exemplifies this that I am quite proud of was we were trying to open up a factory line in Wales. There's a factory we have out there that was a sister company, an internal supplier to the factory we had in Santa Maria. And they just couldn't right the ship, right? They couldn't hit the rates of production that they needed to. So they sent a handful of us out there to take a look at what they were doing. And again, you know, a lot of it wasn't rocket science. It was going and listening to the front line. And so these weren't people that I was even, you know, had a long relationship with, but it's amazing just listening, right? And giving these people the time of day, understanding that their 100 little problems adds up to why you don't hit your targets, and just knocking them out one by one. Things that could be as simple as like get them a power cord so that they don't have to walk, you know, 200 feet to go grab this or that thing. Those little seconds, if they're done, you know, hundreds of times a day, adds up to some pretty substantial gains. So I think that was a really good example where we were able to use pretty simple lean concepts, you know, rearranging workstations, tackling little issues that they had, and eventually was able to get, you know, like a 2.5x improvement in the output per day.
Awesome. So just let me know if there's any questions in the chat. I'm not paying attention. So sure. So when you, so that what did you find so personally gratifying about that project in particular? So what was it when you look back on it? Like, you know, practicing listening and empathy is cool, but you know, the thing that, you know, makes you feel good about you and the work you did for that project.
Yeah, it was that the frontline operators invited me out for drinks like on my last day, right? And it made me realize, like, frequently, I don't know how many of you in this class are in the School of Business or School of Engineering. I studied industrial engineering at Poly, but very rightfully so, you know, one of the managers I work with frequently asks us whenever he comes and talks to our teams, he's like, yeah, I need your ones and zeros right now. Like, we're the beep boop robot people who, you do the calculations, you spit out some number, like this is how it should work in the real world. But it does take a level of empathy to, you know, talk to the people. And so seeing those frontline staff like be so thankful that they would invite me into their personal lives, showed that even though we were there for a specific mission, you know, which was to help get the rate up because some VP wanted it to be at said target, really like the reward comes from making the life easier of, you know, the multitudes that are working out on the shop floors.
Love that. Do we have anybody either in class or online that has a question for Chester? He is one of the cool ones. Not that they're all not cool, but particularly one of the cool ones. So give you time to ask. Anybody? Professor Olsen, do you have a question for Chester?
Yeah, of course I do. So Chester, one of the things you said in your kind of intro section is one of the things you do is you spread continuous improvement, right? Was one of the things you do. Probably some people might want to know, well, how do you spread continuous improvement, right? Are you working on the thinking? You're working on the how to do the tools? How do you spread this stuff?
Sure. Yeah, this is a little top of mind right now. So our team is hiring for a new role, and they kind of asked the same question. And one of the pieces that everybody on my team thinks is like the right idea and a great idea is to start using ourselves more as coaches and building the lean toolbox, lean skill set within people in their own teams. But at the moment, it's more we're the doers, right? So think about like one Chester can only do 1 week's of work within 1 week. But if I was to teach, 5 people, then each week we're doing 5 weeks worth of work. And so at Safran, there was a strong program, a Lean Six Sigma belt program where we would run people through a couple-hour training, and then they would be a white belt. And then we'd start teaching them yellow belt concepts, get them yellow belt certified, run a project with them out on the shop floor in their own department. So we'd be helping out a wide swath of people, whether they're in quality or finance or manufacturing, helping them to learn the concepts through classroom training, but then much more importantly, direct application of those principles and whatever problems they saw in their teams.
Yeah. So all the students in this class are learning all this, Lean Six Sigma green belt stuff, and they might be hired by your company or a company like your company. And that's a good distinction between being the doer and the how to do. Like, where do you think they'll wind up, or how they'll come down on that? You think all these guys will have to teach this stuff to other people, after they pass the test from this class?
I think you have to be able to do both, right? I think they go hand in hand. They're circular. And so the best teachers are the ones who do it, right? Who have done it a lot and understand how to apply the concepts, can speak to a breadth of different experiences. But I think that at some point, because you'll be the source of wisdom, so to speak, people will ask you like, hey, even if it's informally, right? We've had teams here, even though there's no formal lean program, no formal belt system, they said like, oh, you guys are the continuous improvement people. Can you come give my team a class? And so, we'll do a 1-hour session with 15 people. So whether it's formal or informal, like people will come to you because they know you have that knowledge. So I would say, learn the concepts and the tools themselves, I don't think are so important, right? Sometimes people will say like, oh, we're a PDCA place. Sometimes they'll say like, oh, we're an A3 place. Sometimes they'll say, we're a DMAIC place. And it's like, yeah, it's all structured problem solving. It doesn't matter. It's more important that you understand the framework and the concepts and can adapt it to the audience at hand, but also that you're able to convey those concepts quickly to somebody who's never heard of lean, right? Somebody who's just been using their drill press for 20 years and is happy about that. How do you win over their heart and mind? As much as, the eager manager who came from somewhere else and it's like, I want to roll this out to my entire team. Like, I'll give you as much time, like you let me know. Both sides are very important.
Yeah. And I guess too, Chester, leveraging off that, we're giving these students in this class and even this sort of conversation gives them some step up on, how maybe to get started, but, it's necessary, but not sufficient, right? And I would encourage them, just like you and I, you got to do this stuff. Go out there and do it a lot. And every time you do it, you get another cycle of learning, get a little bit smarter. Be generous with trying to help people do this stuff, and you're going to grow, along with them, right?
Yeah, I would say, like 2 pieces of advice I'd have is don't worry about failing. I think in our yellow belt class, it was like something like a 70% failure rate, like people didn't finish their projects. So even if you're working out in the real world, like the more important thing is that you get up and try again, right? Is that if you failed on project 1, that project 2 tries to learn from that experience and builds off of it. And even if project 2 fails, like project 3, hopefully you get it right the 3rd time. It's to keep trying. And then also, I think it's to speak up and ask for things that you want. So the only reason I went down this rabbit hole of lean and continuous improvement is because a new lean manager got hired at our factory and said, like, I'm looking for volunteers for people who are interested in this. And I raised my hand. And next thing I knew, right, I got transferred to his team. So same thing, like if there's something that's interesting to you or you hear about an opportunity, even if you don't feel like you're experienced or prepared or whatever, you know, like jump off a cliff, go for it.
It's actually a really rad segue. I was about to ask you to kind of close out what if you were to give any advice to, you know, these 30, I'm gonna say 31 and change with the folks we have in class, future lean leaders and lean team members, you know, a piece of advice. What would you give them to inspire them to continue down this crazy rabbit hole, as you referred to?
Oh man. I mean, this is super cliche, right? But should like chase whatever is interesting to you. And I think the road will frequently not go where you expected it to be. But once you get into something, you know, you have a wealth of experience in whatever you do, maybe from your personal hobbies, maybe from what you learned in school, but figure out how to apply that knowledge in this new situation, and start working towards what you're interested in. I forget who said it. It's some podcast I was listening to, but they're making the point that, you know, there's only one Michael Jordan. There's only one person who's the best person at basketball. But if you're in the top 10% of basketball players and the top 10% of business people, you know, then all of a sudden you have this Venn diagram that's so much more powerful, so much more explosive than trying to fight to be the best at this one thing. So look at where you can find synergies between different hobbies, interests, skills of yours, because whatever you're into personally, there's a business that supports it, right? And those businesses need accountants and operations managers and quality people and lean coaches, right? So it's, if you look hard enough, you'll find the thing that you're looking for.
So bless you. We're trying.
LeBron, boo.
There's a question to check.
There is. So Chloe, if you want to hop on really quick and ask your question, we will let that. We will end on your question because it's a good one.
Hi, I just had a quick question. I was wondering if you ever had difficulties coming into like a different space and trying to implement lean processes and having difficulties with other employees, and then if so, how did you overcome that?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, this was especially hard, again, being like a ones and zeros engineer, right? And so I remember one of my managers, I don't think it was Matt Weber, but somebody else at Safran said, like, eventually they pulled me aside at some meeting. It was like, you know, I understand that your answer is right. And like your math proves that this is the right way to do things, but just let them, like, again, empathy, right? And it's like, it's hard for an engineer to understand, like, oh yeah, there's a human side to things, but help guide people towards getting to the answer rather than forcing it down their throat, right? At the end of the day, either way gets you to the same endpoint. And so it became much more of like a understanding that different people grow at different rates, different people get to the same conclusion different ways, and having the empathy to be able to, you know, give them the space, let them arrive at those conclusions. And generally they did, right? I think even if you disagree with somebody, like being kind and open to their point of view, seeing where they're coming from, that's 90% of the battle, right? People are going to antagonize with you because of your attitude, not because of your material.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I like to put it like the right thing done at the wrong time is still the wrong thing. So sometimes, and this was one of the hardest lessons that I had to learn being a consultant was sometimes you got to let things simmer. Like you can't overcoach. Even if you're like, I've seen the end of this movie, I know where we're going to land and I know the right thing to do. Sometimes you got to let the learning play out. So
Yeah.
great way to end this, Chloe. So with that, if everybody wants to pop on their cameras and we'll stop recording. Chester, as always, it has been a pleasure. Your shirt and your energy and your answers were all super engaging. So everyone give Chester a wave and a thank you and a round of applause. Appreciate you, my dad.
Thanks all. Have a good one.